Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Kirsty Boyette, and I have the privilege of being the executive director of the nonprofit historical mission-driven State Theater. And I love that you guys are here. This has been a great outreach for us during this crazy time, and we all get to challenge ourselves mentally and intellectually and kind of learn something new. And I've learned a lot during this virtual educational seminar. So thank you for being here. We've got a couple of fun things going on. We have our last drive-in movie, and this Saturday at 9:30, we have Breakfast Club at John Thurman Field. So it's been a great season, and unfortunately our season is coming to an end, but Breakfast Club is going to be a nice wrap up. So if you have not bought tickets already, please do so at thestate.org. We're doing our popcorn sales every Friday night. And I'm very thrilled to say, since April 10th, only on Fridays, we've made $44,000 in popcorn sales. Isn't that crazy? And
that's great.
1,000 of that is donations. So our community has been very, very, very supportive of our efforts, and knowing that we're closed and we've got the best popcorn in town. And I danced around in a popcorn costume.
Oh no.
Gonna go in retirement here really soon. So we will continue on. Looking forward, we've got a Christmas series of movies coming up. We are also going to be doing Christmas gift packs. We're going to be having some merchandise, do like a gift bag with a wine cup and a State Theater shirt and a gift certificate. So stay tuned for that. You can also rent the theater for any private screenings. If you want to be in the Jewel, you can have up to 6 people. If you want to be in the big theater, you can have up to 100 people. The prices vary depending on how many people you have, because obviously it's labor. You can bring your film, you could do family shows, you could dance on the stage, we can make it very custom to whatever your heart desires. You can have a date night in the big theater if you'd like. So look at thestate.org for more information, and we're super excited to have that. And then with that, I want to turn over to Randy Siefkin, who's a board member, who is our local historian for the State Theater, and he's a Mr. Film aficionado, and he's going to introduce our panels. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kirsty. Welcome to the State Theater's presentation of Alexander Payne's 1999 film, Election. How appropriate the night before, the big one. Joining us tonight are former school board member and California Assembly candidate, Kate Nyegaard. Will you wave for us, Kate? Oh, she disappeared. She'll be back though, I'm sure. Professor, nope, not back. We still have Kirsty.
There we go.
Yes. Don't touch anything, Kate.
I think Kate's frozen. Kate, wave.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk here, but I can't, you guys seem frozen to me.
People say that to us all the time, though.
Tell us what you really think.
Really? That's what my students say in the middle of a lecture.
Joining me also on our panel is Professor of Political Science, Larry Giventer from Cal State Stanislaus University, now mostly retired, but still active and going on election duty tomorrow at 6:30 a.m. and will quit around 9 o'clock. He's
right.
Depending on the number.
Polls are open tomorrow at 7 a.m. and they close at 8 p.m. So if you haven't voted, bring your ballot. You can drop it off, or if there's any question at all with respect to your voting, come by one of the satellite centers in Stanislaus County and we'll fix it up for you.
And masks encouraged.
Oh, well, we'll supply the mask and everything else.
Right. And Professor Arnold Anthony Schmidt, who teaches film history and screenwriting at Cal State University, Stanislaus, and is frequent partner with me on this series. So we are talking about a noir series for the spring. Stay tuned. Yes?
Yeah, that should be very exciting if we can get that together. So
Chinatown and others coming down the pike. And as Kirsty has pointed out, I'm Randy Siefkin, former faculty member at Modesto Junior College and longtime member of the State Theater Board. So we are going to give Kirsty the privilege of asking the first question about tonight's film. Kirsty.
Sorry, hold on. I pushed the wrong button. I turned my mute off and all that stuff. Anyway, sorry. So Kate, I'd like to ask you this question. Do you feel that this film could be made today? And if so, why, how?
Well, I think we're in a time when probably nobody would make it, just because it would be so kind of a film that you might not get too many people to come to. And I think, people make films to make money, but I think it certainly is an issue of today, and it could be really well done. And now at this point, we have a woman running for vice president, which is a huge thing. That's something that a lot of us women have been waiting for 100 years, to even vote. This film was was very edgy for someone like me. I've run for office before. I've actually run for office. I was thinking about it once for state assembly, 3 times for school board, and once for rally commissioner when I was in high school at Modesto High. I had that too. So, I've been in office before, and I do think that you are treated differently. You are asked different questions when you run. You are treated more like you're a lightweight, like you maybe couldn't really do the job. You were, quote, just a housewife, that kind of thing. So I don't know how it would go over today. I really don't. It's an interesting question.
So beyond that, any of the other panelists have any comments on the film and whether it could be made today?
It seems to me there's 2 kind of central issues, and in a sense, it's the 2 central conflicts. One is the issue of the election and the candidates, and who's corrupt, who lies, and who is honest. And I think that film could be made today. In other words, the character who's going to accept somebody cheating for them or things like that. I think that kind of a story could be told. I think the other story, though, and this is the issue Kate had raised earlier about, about the way a faculty member works with a student. The Mathew Broderick character, if you think about it, it's a really problematic text. His friend is a sexual predator who, as a man in his 30s, is after a teenager, a 16-year-old girl. He gets caught and he's upset by that. And Mathew Broderick is mad that his friend gets punished for this, and he does terrible things to the student. I mean, if you think about it in actual Me Too terms, this is horrible. Played for comedy, and of course it's a different era, but that story I don't think could be
seduction. It's against the law. You can't have an affair the teacher with a student. I mean, it's unethical, but it also is against the law, and especially with a young girl like in this one. She was probably a freshman, I think, at the time. And so when I was a freshman, I was 13 years old. Yeah. I mean, that's San Quentin, let's say. Yeah.
And actually, I mean, one of the things that's interesting, and if I was reading some criticism of this, the way that his friend talks to her and says, "Oh, you're all alone. Nobody understands you but me." As this is supposedly textbook grooming for sexual predators. You find a young girl that's vulnerable, you convince her that she doesn't have anybody but you, and then you can take advantage of her. So in a sense, it's a very revealing film in that way. And I think that part of the film couldn't be redone.
Well, look, the question I think is really, could the events depicted in the film,
Didn't have any blame.
even though,
He did.
wait, if the events depicted in the film could happen today, and I think they could happen today, and in fact, I think they do happen
They
today.
do.
Whether
They
it be
do.
in high school or in colleges and so forth, the inappropriate relationships between a person of power and a student, the kind of importance that is attached to a fairly trivial election. We saw that
Yeah, totally.
parallels to
I
that
think he was.
in our elections. We saw that with respect to Nixon and his cohorts going back and rigging elections when they were in college.
Yeah.
And we see that depicted even to today with respect to the misogynistic and sexist behaviors of people in power with respect to people, subordinate people within organizations.
Yeah,
Like
you know,
presidents and
an
interns.
interesting side thing here, which I really didn't know, even though I ran my husband's medical practice for 40 years, but I really never thought about it. But if you're a doctor, a male doctor, and you have a female patient, you cannot even date them until they get a different doctor to be ethical. So that's the Hippocratic Oath kind of a thing, or the ethics of being in medicine. And I don't think most people realize that.
So we have another question in here. While they're closely related concepts, morals refer mainly to guiding principles, and ethics refer to specific rules and actions or behaviors. A moral precept is an idea or opinion that's driven by a desire to be good. An ethical code is a set of rules that defines allowable actions or correct behavior. Sorry, that was not a question. That was a statement. Sorry. But thank you.
So do we learn anything about the distinction in the film? Or not? I mean, Tracy Flick tears down election posters and then
Liz, does
Yeah, but-
anybody in the film have,
Tammy was looking for a way to get out of her high school.
is Tammy
yeah.
the only one who has both ethics and morals? I mean, she does lie about who took down the posters, but is she, I mean, she's certainly the moral center of the film.
Well, you know, I think that, well, I guess she is in a way, but she lies, and but the two men both were unethical. Well, they were immoral. I think they were cheating on their wives. They were having affairs and so forth. And actually, the heroine, the Flick girl, she really wasn't. You know, she had a single parent. She didn't have a father in her life. You could see that. The fact that that he seduced her really wasn't. I mean, she could have said no. She was very young. I doubt if she really even knew what was happening until it was practically happening. But he was the really guilty guy, as far as I'm concerned, because he's supposed to know better. He's the adult. And the same, you know, she was a person who isn't. She's kind of full of herself. I mean, I get that, and she's not what we like to have a person. But she wanted to get ahead. You know, she knew that she didn't have money and she didn't have a family behind her. She was trying to get a leadership role so she could put it on her college application. And I think that's not unethical. I mean, everybody tries to, you know, do their best to get accepted. And so, you know, I don't see her as a real evil person at all.
You don't see her as, Mick LaSalle refers to her in one review as a sociopath. You don't see her that way?
No. Why? In what way is she a sociopath?
Because she's so driven and willing to run over people to get where she wants.
But she didn't run over anybody. I mean, she was a good campaigner. She was
Yes.
organized. She did a good job. She had a good speech, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
actually she thought she wasn't running against the hero of the high school football team, you know. So I don't see her as a bad person at all. I think she just, you know, was kind of.
What do you think of the other key female character, Tammy Metzger?
Yeah, well, that was an interesting threesome there with Paul, with the football hero, who was kind of like, he really didn't want to do it, I don't think. And I didn't think he was very, very capable of the job, particularly. I don't even think he wanted to do it, but I don't think he would have been a good president. But his sister, you know, and her friend kind of come in there, and I didn't see them as bad, to be honest with you. And I mean, here we are, 3 men against 1 woman here. I think the men were the guilty parties in this thing. I really do. I think they were the older people. They should have known better. Both of the men were unethical and immoral in their own way, by you know, changing the votes, and then with the affair and all that. And actually the younger kids, I didn't think they really were so much in on the immoral and unethical things. Because when you campaign or when you run for office, you have to believe that you're going to win. You not only have to believe you're going to win, but you have to project that you believe in yourself. It's really almost like an acting job to run for office. We see that.
But does the winning matter? I mean, here, what's at stake in this particular election in this high school? I mean, what doesn't matter about who's president of the student council? Does the student council have any influence at all on educational policy? Actually, I think Tammy Metzger might be the most sensible person in the film. Says the heck with it all.
Yeah, but the flick gal, Tracy, she wanted to get into a college, and she knew that she needed to show that she had some leadership qualities or some experience. And so for her, this meant a lot to her. It was everything to her.
Yeah, she's playing the system, and Tammy Metzger says, "The heck with the system. The whole system is corrupt. I'm not having anything to do with the system. I don't even want to go to college because the whole thing is nuts." That's what she said.
Well, yeah, but I think she's off base on that. I mean, Tracy was a smart girl, and she had great grades, and she knew she had the grades to get in, and she wasn't sure. She wanted to try to get a scholarship, and in order to get a scholarship and to move up when you're in she's not upper class. I mean, as far as her family. So I don't see her as a bad person at all. I mean, she didn't appeal to me. I mean, she's a little, but she did the campaigning. She made her signs. She you know, she didn't do anything immoral there. And her sign fell down because she tripped and it, you know, and it came down, and then she got really frustrated with it. But I have to defend her. I'm sorry.
I would agree with that. I think a sociopath is somebody who doesn't really know the difference between right and wrong and who acts accordingly. And I think she's largely an overachiever, because this isn't the only thing that she's done, that Tracy has done, that is really you know, impressive. She's excelled in lots and lots of things, and I mean, yeah, there is the issue with the professor and that kind of stuff, but generally she's an overachiever. The only ethical thing that we know that she, you know, genuinely does unethically is that she knows that she didn't, you know, that this thing with the signs, and she kind of lets that go. I was talking about Tammy. I think Tammy is in certain sense, and you know, she does kind of pull back and give up. But in other words, she doesn't really. She lies in the sense that she takes, you know, she says, "I did this," when she didn't. But it's, I mean, I think that's that's the real binary there, of, you know, there's two kind of ethical kind of situations there. One, somebody who is benefiting from the evil thing that, you know, I found this wallet and it has $1 million in it. What do I do with it? You know, is it enough to keep it? You know, and the other person who's actually like, you know, kind of doing that. So, but I think that's an interesting kind of comparison.
Tracy has her hand up.
we have a question from the panel, from the participants. And it's very related to what you're talking about right now. One of the panelists remarks that Tracy was the moral center of the film. Interestingly, I thought Paul, played by Chris Klein, as the naive but moral center. Comments?
And naive he was.
He reminds me of
he wasn't invested in something. Tracy had a lot at stake in this election because of her unparalleled ambition. Paul, I think, understood his sister, who just rejected the system outright. Paul, I think, would have been a fairly innocuous and tolerable candidate. He almost won the election. Matter of fact, he would have won had he not voted for Tammy. I mean, had he not voted for Tracy, which he did. If he hadn't done that, he would have
voted for himself.
He should have voted for himself. Then everything would have been cool.
When you run for office, or when you run in an election, you always vote for yourself. You should always vote for yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, then you shouldn't be running.
So that raises an interesting question. Larry, in your presentation, you talk about how we vote. And generally speaking, it's a first past the post system.
Plurality, that's correct.
Yes, guy. Yeah. But there are some differences. There are other systems out there. Maine is doing ranked voting again.
Ranked choice voting.
You put down various choices.
Plug ranked choice voting into YouTube. There's some good explanatory videos on that subject.
So I was thinking today, what would have been the outcome if the students had voted ranked choice? You know, the first choice, second choice. Well, you could, Tammy would have
the outcome would have been that Tammy would have won because had she not been disqualified, she would have won outright with a plurality. She had well over 50%. And so she would have won the plurality. It was an interesting ballot because if you look at the ballot, they went through all the ballots and they blanked out Tammy's name. She was completely redacted from the election, but they voted for her anyway. and she would have won.
I think the way you want to think about it is, what if each homeroom, we set up an electoral college where each homeroom got a certain number of votes, and then we could have a convention of those candidates, those delegates, and
there'll probably been high school simulations like that, and
I think there's one you can buy now.
Of course, we'll act it out over the next week.
So the next question is, Tracy seemed to trade on her sexuality and other manipulative tools to gain favors. Kate, to what extent do female candidates have to be a little Tracy in order to be elected?
Well, I know myself, I didn't have to be because, the only thing that happened to me was that I would get questions about women's issues, but my opponent would not. So it's that isn't really right, but that's the way it is. And I mean, in high school, I wasn't aware of all this kind of stuff going on. I mean, I had 2 children in high school and so forth too, but I just, like I say, I was kind of blown away with the way they portrayed it, because it's kind of cynical, really. I realize it's a movie, but they're trying to cover all the bases in the one the one movie, all of the different issues. But I don't know. I should ask you, Christy, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if I agree with it, but I think women sometimes use their feminine woes. I think Kamala's using a little bit of it. Not to get political on current days, but I mean, I think Tracy always looked her best and dressed the part.
But I don't know, all girls, when they go to high school, at least in my day, they tried to look their best. I mean,
Right.
So that wouldn't be anything different than what you just do.
If you read the book, she's even more sexual. And so the kind of desexes her to some degree. So interesting. At one point, the author of the book said that in this film, that everyone is either a victimizer or a destroyer. And that there's no one really with any redeeming behavior in the.
Well, I think the football players, there's nothing wrong with him. I mean, he
just goes with the flow, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a football player. There again, there's the issue of, do you have to be an athlete? The athletes in the world make more money than just anybody who is not an athlete, if that's what they're doing. And they also get famous and fame just from the fact that they can do athletics. But in a way, I'm not talking about just women, but if you're not an athlete, you're you just don't count. You can't make the big bucks, and you can't get the notoriety, either an athlete or a singer or an actor or something. Mm-hmm. That was always strange to me, that when I was on the school board, we would have the kids come every meeting and lead the Pledge of Allegiance and they were usually like fourth graders or maybe fifth graders. And then before they did it, they would ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And 90% of them wanted to either be a football star or a baseball star or a singer. So that says something about our
astronaut wasn't open then.
No, they didn't want to be an astronaut. That was never said. And I was there for 12 years. So, I mean, it was always the two things that, the fame and the make a lot of money. So that's just a comment, but that is an unfair thing in a way too, if you just don't happen to be an athlete, I
mean, one thing that strikes me about the film, and this is more like a kind of a general comment about winning, is, and I don't know, I mean, it's never happened to me, but I wonder how I would feel if I won a big award or a foundation or a big grant, and I knew that either I had cheated or that somebody else deserved it. In other words, there's no sense here of that somebody wins and like, I work hard, I deserve this thing, and I earned it and I got it, and that's admirable. But I just wonder about the psychology of this notion of, I don't want to say like the ends justify the means, but how do you, like, what does it say about a person, or what does it say about a society that says, well, it doesn't really matter if I cheat, as long as I get into this school, or as long as I get this award, or as long as I win this prize. And then there's a public view of that, right? So-and-so is a winner, but there's the private view when you get up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, wait a minute, I'm presenting myself as the winner of this, and in fact I didn't. Or I mean, it just seems to me, and I know we talked about this in other contexts at another time, but the idea of, like winning the Super Bowl and you sort of cheat a little, or winning, a baseball game and you just cheat a little, and everybody seems to think it's okay, right? Nobody's like, oh, that's a terrible thing. But at a certain point you realize, wow, I'm saying I'm this good, but I'm really not that good because I cheated. And I don't see that in Tracy. Now she's young, she's a kid. And maybe when she's, maybe in 30 years, she'll look back and go, well, my big regret is that I did this. But it seems like there's a kind of a moral relativism that we're seeing certainly in some of the characters, and that the ends justify the means.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So we have another question. I once read that this movie was inspired by the 1992 election pitting George H.W. Bush with Bill Clinton. I believe this was due to the spoiler candidacy of Ross Perot, which threw the election to Clinton. Are there any other parallels to modern elections?
Yes. I'll start off with the Nixon presidency, in which we had a cadre of his assistants had first honed their skills in order to throw a student election. I believe it was USC, when they were among the student body there for an inconsequential political office in that student body. Also, a very clear parallel is the Gore versus Bush election, which was decided in Florida. There, you can either attribute Bush's winning Florida by only 537 votes, either to the candidacy of Ralph Nader or to the candidacy of Pat Buchanan, that took votes away, took votes away in any case from Gore. And then further in that election, they stopped counting the ballots.
That was the real problem.
Here you saw that ballot counting was very important. As I put in the presentation, there's a classic political adage. It's not who votes who determines the election. It's who counts the votes who determines the election. And I will forecast that we're going to see that play out in the coming week.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
It's not going to be decided on election night?
Oh my God, well, something will be decided. We've got to be decided what to do for the next few days. Remember that the Gore v. Bush matter went on for the next month. All I can say, it'll come to a head by December 8th, because by law, the electoral votes have to be decided state by state by December 8th. We'll see what happens after that.
But see, the court,
I think it's going to be pretty wild for the next few days.
Yeah, the court stepped in and decided that one, and
That's
then
right.
They decided that they were done, and and Gore, I think took the high road and didn't argue about it because he didn't want to say, in a democracy, we don't accept the vote. But the fact is that I think in that case, the court just decided they were going to, the votes hadn't all been counted and everything, but they were just going to call it. And that's wrong. You better count all the votes.
It's all who counts the votes.
And that's why you're going to the poll, Larry.
I'm
No, I trust you.
I like Kate and Randy, and perhaps yourself, Arnold. I hearken back to the days when I relished going in person to the poll.
Yeah.
With those good old mechanical voting machines,
Yes.
throwing the lever and pulling down the actual tab. That was an exercise in voting. So I believe in voting. And that's why I participate. I've worked general elections and primary elections. This will be, I think, about my 30th primary or general election. Randy and I used to have election returns on live on television.
Good looking channel, something or other.
KAZB TV, and I remember we were staying up very late, hours on end, in 2000 at the Gore v. Bush election, and Randy and I called it correctly. He said, "Don't depend upon Florida," and the TV lights were so bright in our faces, and we were on camera for so long that I came away that night with a sunburn.
Wow. Well, I think that as far as politics and elections, the main thing, and I used to go to the high schools, they'd ask me after I had run for state assembly to come and talk about politics and, just in voting, because, it wasn't about one thing or the other. But I said to the kids, these were all seniors, I said, being in office, there's a lot of good jobs in government. There's a lot of jobs that pay well, and they're good jobs. You should think about it. But I said, if you ever are going to be involved in an election, run for something, just be sure that you don't ever do anything that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of a paper, because I can guarantee you that if you do run for office, they'll figure it out, whatever happened, whatever you did, and it'll be there. So my thing is, there's nothing worse that you can do to yourself is to lie about things, because you're gonna have to live with it. And once you cross the line to be dishonest and untrustworthy, and people don't believe that they can trust you, you've lost your reputation. So it's very important. I think I know my dad always said to me, there's nothing you can do in life that would be worse than lying, because there's nothing that you could do that you'd have to lie about that would be worse than actually doing the lie. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. And I am now 84. So it's been a long life and a long 65-year marriage. So, which is still continuing.
Great.
Basically, I believe in honesty and in being, being trustworthy and so forth. And so I think this is why this movie really shocked me. I mean, it was totally unlike the way I think about things like that, and I've been involved in it a lot. So, but I do believe in being, not crossing the line, because once you cross the line, it's very hard to get back on the other side again. That's my take.
The opposition research people will find out. So one critic of this film said that the film is a parable for elections in general, which voters have to choose from among the kinds of people who have been running for office since high school. Sort of the Tweedledee, Tweedledum, same old. So, Larry, you said you believe in voting. What's the sense?
Well,
Same old, same old.
well, first of all, let's attempt to come up with a quick definition of democracy, which government by the people. Well, how do people participate in a government? Well, it has to be by elections, where we elect, either make policy choices, or we elect representatives. How do we run an election? Well, we have to make choices among the choices that are available on the ballot. What gets on the ballot? That is a political process by which, in California, we either see propositions or we see candidates placed on the ballot either by petition or by political party. But you have to understand, in order to exercise democracy, we have to make a choice. And we make a choice by elections. The elections are exercises in voting. Fundamentally, in order to choose among available choices, in order to make decisions for ourselves, we vote. Fundamentally, that's freedom. If we don't have choices, and we don't have the ability to choose among choices, to that extent, we don't have freedom. If our choice is not to vote, we have given up, to that extent, freedom. So fundamentally, we have defined freedom by voting.
Okay, so then we should make the system more democratic, yes?
I think we ought to have more voting. I like free and frequent elections. The key thing is what gets on the ballot, what choices we have available, and make sure that franchise, that ability to choose, is available to all.
So it doesn't bother you that we have to vote on multiple propositions?
Not at all. What bothers me is that so many people don't understand the process of propositions or some of the complexity of propositions. But I would rather have that ability which is, by the way, founded in California in the progressive era of the turn of the century. That's the 1800s to the 1900s, was the real era of progressive politics under Hiram Johnson in California. Yeah, so I given our choice, I like the system and I like voting.
Even though the choices are only apples or oranges. When sometimes,
As Paul pointed out, we do have third choices. He likes bananas.
Well, we certainly had enough people running for president this time or last time. What was it, like 20 people running? So you do have a lot of choices. I mean, anybody can decide to run. I mean, you don't have to pay well, you do have a little fee, I guess, when you do it, but it's not. I ran for these offices 4 times. Nobody asked me to run. Nobody encouraged me to run. I just decided that I was going to do it. Mm-hmm. Because I thought that, just like you, I think a democracy works. And when I ran, there was nobody running against the other person, and that's not a democracy. So I just did it. So, I mean, you can, it's not a bad thing. I mean, and not everybody who runs. In fact, I think, at least 90% of the people in politics are probably really honest, but everybody thinks that everybody's, bad, but I don't think they are. And I've gotten to know a lot of people that are.
Oh gosh, go ahead.
I think there's also a difference, going back to Randy's apples and oranges issue. We may think, or the public may think, and I think Kate's right. I think this idea that I think there are many people who are idealistic and who have like beliefs, and then there's a group, just like in any business, where where people are a little more cutthroat. But there's a difference between the candidate and their platform. So we can say so-and-so's a politician, he or she's a crook. This one's a politician, there's the crook. But if they're in 2 different parties and you take 10 different issues, they have 10 different positions. So you can't, you're not voting. This whole idea, I want to vote for him because I want to have a beer with him, is ridiculous. You vote for him because he supports a position that you agree with. You like solar power or you don't. You want, there's certain issues, and that's what's really going on. And the rest of it is the apple and orange. It doesn't matter what, here's somebody, I don't care, I don't like them in particular, but when they get in, these things are going to happen. And I think that goes back to what Larry's saying, that progressive era idea, that there's a position that you're advocating, a worldview. My worldview is this, and I'm supporting that. It happens to be this guy that I don't think much of, or this woman I don't think much of, but that worldview is one that I support, and therefore the world will be a better place if those policies go in, not if this person goes in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think policy, I don't know. I mean, I vote because of what a person, stands for, essentially what they want, or if they want the same things that I want. But I don't think that you're right. It's not the person per se. It's what they want to work for, what they want to make happen.
So the question about back to the film, it says, my girlfriend and I were so taken by this movie. After that, we watched about Schmidt the same evening, also directed by Alexander Payne. I love the way Payne tells a story and lets it unfold in a very Midwestern, organic sort of way. Is this true for all of his movies?
Yeah, this is a good question. There's actually, one of the things that scholars have talked about is that as a Midwest, that there's so many filmmakers who are either from New York or LA that kind of capture that, they're presenting the city in a certain way, Scorsese or somebody that's presenting their city in a certain way. And people have talked about him as kind of uniquely, except for The Descendants, which takes place in Hawaii, really dealing with Midwest life and Midwest locations, and as much as you could say, Midwest values. So that's certainly one of the things that people have kind of put out there.
And you're using a lot of Midwestern talent. This film is a good example of that, using locals, Klein and others, high school students.
Yeah, it was actually filmed in a high school while the high school was in session.
Yes, yeah, not the original one though. Because the superintendent read the script and said, not in my high school, so.
Oh, really?
They went across the line and filmed it. That superintendent was quite happy. Someone has pointed out the name of the high school was George Washington Carver High School, and there are virtually no students of color in this high school. Maybe that's typical of Omaha, I don't know, at the time, 1999, probably not. But.
Okay, so we have a question. Why does the likability and personality of a candidate sometimes outweigh the issues the candidate believes in?
Well, I think that's the voter, the person who's looking at him. It's not because the candidate wants it to be that way. It's because the people who are voting sometimes want it to be. It's like right now what we're seeing, the people that are going to Trump's rallies that like the rally and the hype with it are not afraid of the virus, and then you see Biden is a much less of a production, and more quiet and more, wearing your mask and all that. So I think it's what the voters like, not particularly what the candidate likes. The candidate adjusts to the people who are going to vote for him, I think. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
We've had many entertainers participate in just in state and national politics. The classic one, of course, immediately coming to mind is Ronald Reagan.
Sure. Or Schwarzenegger.
Yes.
In both of those cases, I think what you got and the way that they used their theatrical talent was to present, I don't want to say sincerity as though they were insincere. I don't mean it that way, but to communicate their sincerity of what they believe. Like they used it to enhance their personality. They didn't turn the campaign into a spectacle, into a kind of a bread and circuses thing. They basically used it as an individual to make themselves as individual candidates more likable, or to communicate their idea more effectively. So it's more like driven, it's centripetal. It goes into them. Their theatrical ability was in them that they used, rather than let's turn the whole thing into a show and make it, kind of going outside of themselves.
Yeah, that's a good comment.
Campaigns are in effect a show. You're putting on a show.
They are.
Yeah.
What was it? Boston Ross used to say people like corn more than caviar. Kind of their mantra for organizing campaigns back in the 1930s and 1940s. In fact, it helped launch Richard Nixon's campaign for Congress in 1946. In fact. So Larry, back to your point about participation, are there other ways that we could look at to increase participation? Even though this year may be a record, but there are people who've suggested ranked choice voting or changing the electoral college, challenging IB, campaign finance reform, so that money doesn't dominate politics. This has been a very expensive election year. Ending gerrymandering. So it's truly a one person, one vote system. Combating efforts at voting suppression. Do you think any of those recommended?
How about all of the above?
Well, California, I think, is a good case in point where we've instituted some necessary reforms. Some years ago, we passed a proposition that called for a redistricting commission that is a bipartisan setup that redraws. So we've taken gerrymandering, which was politically motivated by the dominant party in the legislature. We've taken that largely out of the factors in California. We've instituted almost universal automatic voter registration. In fact, I think in sometime in the future, we'll probably do away with voter registration altogether. There's no need for it. We have automatic means for determining person's residency and citizenship. You can see it if you go to a voting center today. We don't have voter ID in California or anything close to it, but we do verify everybody's ID. They don't need to pull out a driver's license, but everybody's identification is verified by the signature on the ballot. These are automated processes that are very accurate. So increasingly, we encourage universal citizen participation. The extent of actual participation depends upon how the electorate gets excited about the candidates or the issues of the day. Here we see a great deal of excitement in today's election, but having low participation or an unexciting election or candidates is not necessarily an indication of any fault in the system. It may very well be the opposite, that there's a great deal of satisfaction in the system.
We have a question.
What about the Electoral College? Talk about that. I mean, to me, that seems the most unfair thing. I think the majority should win, the one vote, one person.
But the problem with that is if we did away with the Electoral College and have strictly one person, one vote, then the campaign would be decided in New York, Florida, and California. But
it doesn't matter because the people are in those places too.
Yeah. But but here
it would be the number of people. It wouldn't be fair. It would be the majority.
Look what the candidates are being forced to do because of the Electoral College. They're carrying their message not only to Florida, but look, they're campaigning in Pennsylvania, in Michigan,
Wisconsin,
in Iowa. Should those people in the flyover countries be disenfranchised? Shouldn't they have?
We never see the candidates. They never come to California. They never come
to raise money.
They come here to raise money.
Well, no, but they don't come here to campaign.
No, they don't come here to
campaign. They've been in Pennsylvania like 20 times this year, and
Also,
they never come here. Have we ever had anybody in Modesto? It's hard to remember.
Yeah, Bush once came through Modesto on a bus.
Yeah.
I think too, if you think about if candidates had to campaign in New York and California and Texas and Florida, racial justice would be a very different kind of an issue.
That's right.
You know, in other words, it really would change the way, you go to when the primaries begin, and they begin in New Hampshire, they begin in Iowa, small states that are mostly, ethnically, homogeneous. And certain things happen. Whereas if most people are in fact, if in those places, in those populous states or in cities rather than rural life, then that needs to be addressed in some way. Now, I think, again, one of the things that always comes up is we can either have this or that. And I always think, well, why can't we just go in the middle somewhere? Okay, the Electoral College is a mess. So then maybe we fix it to go 60% or 80%.
Yeah. There are options to do that. We don't have to totally do away with the Electoral College, but if we wanted to, there's some good resources, again, on YouTube or on the internet. We can do away with the Electoral College without amending the Constitution. There are moves afoot to do that.
And there are two states where you can split the electoral vote. They're not cast.
That seems like a good solution.
We could do away with winner take all on the Electoral College per state, and divide up the electoral votes in a state by congressional district, for instance. That's the way they do it in Maine and Nebraska, the two states that Randy just referred to. So there are, as Arnold pointed out, there are middle grounds. There are other ways of doing it, but the rules of the game currently are that we have a plurality election, winner take all, loser gets nothing.
Yeah, but what I don't like is that the majority of votes, in about 3 of the last 8 elections, the person who got the majority vote didn't get the presidency. And I think that's unfair.
Yeah, those founding fathers.
If we define fairness by strictly by one person, one vote, but that criterion alone, you're absolutely correct.
Okay, I've got one last question and then we're gonna wrap it up. Who would have won Carver High's election? Sorry, who would have won Carver High's election were ballot harvesting been allowed at the time? What if ballot harvesting had been allowed at the time?
I'm sorry, Kirsty, you broke up and I didn't understand the question.
Who would have won the election if ballot harvesting had been allowed at the time?
What's the matter with ballot harvesting? Ballot harvesting is where someone goes around on behalf of a candidate, collects ballots, supposedly they have been sealed and already voted, and delivers them on behalf of the voter to the elections office. That is strictly what ballot harvesting is. It would be the problem that people might envision is if the so-called ballot harvester influenced the voter. For instance, if they had a voting party, for instance, and supervised someone filling out their ballot and did this, say at a residence facility, and then collected all these things and brought them to, that's what they're afraid of. But strictly speaking, there's nothing the matter with ballot harvesting. In effect, we allow that in California. If somebody votes a ballot and says to their relative, to a friend, save me a trip to the drop box, drop this ballot off for me, they can do that. You just simply sign the outside of the envelope and you can do that. Is that ballot harvesting? Just do that instead of 2 or 3 at a time. Do it 5 or 10. When does it become problematic? So long as the ballot is sealed and the person delivering it signs it on the outside of the envelope, as there's a line that they're required by law to do.
All right, any other questions, comments?
No, I did though run across the outcome of the Student Weekly poll of 150,000 students across the country. Of course, they had to vote online, and it showed that the election is going to be won by Joe Biden. And this poll has been accurate in all elections since 1940, except for 3 times.
Uh-oh.
And the last time they were wrong was
Bush Gore.
I have taught opinion research and public opinion polling, and just remember, polls are snapshots in time, and are snapshots in yesterday's time. They are not predictive.
Yes.
So even though the pundits are making a great deal of hay on the media about these polls, they are simply reflections of yesterday's opinion.
And if the National League wins the World Series, the Democrats win.
I have to say, I think the other issue is we tend to obsess with the top of the ticket. And, there's millions of people voting for president. The number of people who are voting in Stanislaus County for my representative, my school board person is really, if you think your vote doesn't count, when those are the ballots that can come down to 50 votes. And so it's the down.
And they have. We have seen the elections by a flip of a coin or the draw of a card. Local elections have been decided that way.
Yeah.
So we got a comment from Deborah in the chat saying, "Wonderful seminar, thank you." And with that, I would like to thank all of our panelists. Randy, Siefkin, I love your little
Tracy button. I was going to do virtual cupcakes, but I couldn't figure out how to do it.
I love it.
I thought you
And
could,
I have
Randy.
my Mr. Smith button on.
Oh,
Just in case, you want an honest politician, you have to apparently have to go to the movies, and they have to be Capra movies.
yeah, and Arnold Schmidt.
That's my 30-year pin for elections.
Oh,
That's it.
And Kate, our newest panelist to our virtual educational seminars. Thank you, Kate, for being here.
You're welcome. Yeah, I
Thank you,
enjoy
Kate.
it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned. We will have more virtual educational seminars coming up. And like I mentioned, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on at the State Theater. Come by, get popcorn on Friday, and come to the drive-in on Saturday night. And look forward to a lot of exciting things going on in the state. So with that, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Good night, all.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone, for
Happy
coming.
tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget to vote.
Bye.
Hey, click.